text for the day. We are in the Epiphany season, and it's the first season that the Christians came up with. And manifest means apparent, obvious, real. And you know, those people in those days, they heard a lot of myths, you know, about gods and the Greeks and mythology. And so it was only natural for Christians to say, well, did it really happen? Did it really happen? And in the Epiphany season, the Gospels every Sunday reflect some historical event to remind the Christians he really did come. Remember the wedding at Cana? We were there. Jesus was there. Changed water into wine. His baptism, we were there. We saw that. So that's what the Epiphany season is all about. Nailing down the fact that God sent His Son, Jesus, into the world to be our Redeemer. Well, the text I've chosen for today, these words from Matthew, the 13th chapter. He went to his hometown and taught the people in their synagogue in such a way that they were amazed. Where did he get this wisdom and the power to do these miracles? They asked. Isn't he the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas his brothers? And aren't all his sisters here with us? Where did he get all this? So they turned against him. Jesus was from Galilee, the province of Galilee. If this were a map of Israel, it's in the north part, up in the hill country. They talk with a funny accent up there. And his hometown was Nazareth. And the people, the Nazarenes, were dumbfounded. They took pride in knowing the measure of a man, but they were at wits' ends. They were baffled. They had witnessed a phenomenon that defied explanation. They were bewildered. They had just listened to a sermon. Jesus taught them in their very own synagogue. And it was a sermon like they had never heard before. Not like the thin, dry discourses of the scribes or the Pharisees. This one went to the heart. It soared to the heights. It plumbed the deeps. It pulsated with life. It throbbed with power. Where they said to themselves, hath this man this wisdom? They began by wondering at the sermon, and they ended up wondering at the man. This man was the cause of their astonishment. Had his sermon come from a rabbi, a church leader, a priest, or a scribe, it would have been a marvel. But coming from this man, Jesus, it was a miracle. Jesus was no stranger to them. He grew up in Nazareth, lived there as a boy, then as a man for 30 years. Probably worked as a carpenter alongside Joseph. Built houses, made furniture, prepared and repaired plows. He had only recently left carpentry and began ministry, preaching. And this was his first visit to Nazareth after starting his public ministry. His first sermon to the folks back home. And they were astonished. Whence hath this man this wisdom? How could this happen, they said. They could not account for his greatness by his background. They judged, as often we judge today, on two things: parentage and education. Parentage. We say he inherited his strong will from his dad, or he inherited his wisdom from his mother, or comes from a fine family, noble blood, a good family, good stock. We attribute it to the family. Or we attribute it to education. Education makes the man. To his schooling. Today we say, like, it's a graduate of an Ivy League college, a Harvard graduate. You can always tell a Harvard graduate, but you can't tell him much. London School of Economics, West Point, I mean the Naval Academy, excuse me, the United States Navy Academy, Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, all going a long way to etch character in a person. But not Jesus. He came from humble parentage. After all, he was Joseph's son, wasn't he? That's what they thought. Mary was his mother. And they all knew his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, and his sisters. Are they not all with us here in town? His family history could not account for these marvelous things. They were just plain folks. No shining, extraordinary qualities. Nor was his education to account for it. He never sat at the feet of Gamaliel like St. Paul did. Young people in those days didn't go to universities. They sat at the feet of some great philosopher or teacher, but not Jesus. He had no mentor, no special friend, no tutor, no wise advisor. He was just a peasant woman's son. Yet here he was pouring out heavenly grace and wisdom, unheard of before. Whence hath this man this wisdom? He was the unaccountable man. The impression that Jesus produced at Nazareth was the same everywhere he went. Among the Romans, the rabbis, the ragtag. They marveled, they wondered. People were astonished. You remember these remarks about him from the Gospel. Luke, 12 years old at the temple. All that heard him were amazed. Sermon on the Mount. The multitudes were astonished by his teaching. Jerusalem, the Jews marveled, saying, how knoweth this man letters, having never learned? I looked that up in the original language. I like the Beck translation. Beck is one of our Missouri Synod translators. He said it reads this way: how does he know so much, having never been in schools? His disciples were amazed. Mark 10:32. Pontius Pilate, the governor, marveled greatly. Matthew 27. He was unique. Men could not explain him. Whence art thou? By what authority do you do these things? He was unaccountable. Jesus today is still the world's unaccountable man. Everyone else can be explained, but Christ remains a mystery, a marvel of the world. He was to the people of Palestine generally that what he is to men and women today. There have been many great men, great thinkers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, poets like Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, rulers like Alexander the Great, Caesar, Napoleon, and my favorite, George Washington. And while we admire these men, we are not puzzled by them. They were, after all, only men. They can be explained, they can be accounted for. But Jesus was different. He belongs not to earth at all, but to another sphere, to another realm, to another kingdom. He is the wonder of this age. As he stood 2,000 years ago confronting the Nazarenes, so he confronts us, me and you, today. Whence hath this man this wisdom? Jesus cannot be accounted for as you account ordinary men. There is but one way of accounting for his wisdom, his authority, his mighty works, and that is by accepting his claims, by accepting his works, his miracles, and his resurrection. In Jesus we have the only begotten Son of God, God of God, light of light, very God of very God. And that explains everything. People say it's hard to believe in the deity of Christ. It's harder still not to believe. For not to believe leaves Jesus a riddle, a strange portent, an inexplicable phenomenon. But to believe that God was in Christ reconciling the world into himself is to understand his wisdom and his authority and from whence he came. The deity of Christ is not some dry dogma that's to be taught at the seminary. It is in fact the only rational explanation, the only logical conclusion, and it falls upon the heart through faith. And if Jesus Christ be God, what is your attitude towards him? Hazlitt was an Englishman. He was brilliant. He was a writer. He was a poet. He was a painter. He was famous. And he once wrote an essay about a conversation between friends. They were talking about persons one would like to have seen. Many names were mentioned. Chaucer, Dante, Oliver Cromwell, all Englishmen, of course. This is in the 1800s when this happened, and so on. But when the turn came for a man named Lamb, he said, "There is only one person I can ever think of after this." Everybody knew who he meant. He said, if Shakespeare were to come into this room, we should all rise to meet him. But if that person was to come into the room, we should all fall down and kiss the hem of his garment. That person is here today in this place, truly present in word and sacraments. Oh, that we would all have the grace to fall down and kiss the hem of his robe and say with the Apostle Thomas of old, "My Lord and my God." Amen.
Amen.